This video is for students who are looking for an overview and some modeling of Day 8 in Unit 2, which focuses on the questions, why was Native American land dispossessed, and what primary source best helps us explain this terrible history, with the objective of you being able to determine the causes of Native American removal and evaluate the reliability of primary sources to determine which has the greatest utility to explain this terrible history. So basically, you are going to look at several primary sources relating to the causes of this horrible event, evaluate the reliability of a couple of them, then use the one that you deem to be the most reliable to support a claim you will make at the end of this lesson. We start by examining a map titled Removal of American Indians 1830 to 1838, which I'm going to pull up right here. And I know it is not specifically mentioned in the lesson, but think back to all the practice you've already had analyzing maps. Some of the look-fors you should always keep in mind are the sourcing, if it's provided, the title, and the key, which we can see right up here. Then look over the map as a whole and try to focus in on specific details. After that, always try to determine at least one trend or big idea this map informs us of. Ask yourself things like, what inferences can I make? How does this connect to what I already know about the time period depicted in this map? Lastly, do a brief reliability evaluation of the map by considering its purpose and limitations. If it has been a while since you've done this, you might want to ask your teacher to provide you with the map analysis tool, which will offer you some support and guidance with this. After you are done, independently record 3 big ideas that you took from the map, which you are going to write in these 3 boxes here on the left. Then your teacher will arrange breakout rooms where you and a partner will share your 3 big ideas with each other, bringing your total to 6. Together, you must decide on which 2 that are either the most important, influential, or relevant. After you and your partner make your decisions, and you record both of them here, it is now up to you to independently reflect on both of them and narrow it down to one that you believe is the single most important big idea. During the whole class share-out that follows, you should record 3 additional big ideas that are shared by your classmates that resonate with you. Maybe they provided support for an idea you already had, or maybe they challenged you and made you think about things in a different manner. Whatever reason you decide on, record them here on the left, and then use these 3, plus the original one that you decided on, to construct a definition of Native American removal, which you're going to enter into this box here. The next part of this lesson is an introductory text by Professor Catherine Denial titled The Long History of Native American Removal, where she provides a detailed, longer-term historical context for the removal of Native Americans that really came to a head in the 1830s, which is what we are going to be focusing on in this lesson. As you read this text, I would focus your annotations on identifying and classifying the causes. You should use different color highlighters to differentiate between long and short-term causes along with triggers. Doing so is a great way for you to prepare for the analysis that the causation tool is going to guide you through, which we see right here. For step 1, the tip of the iceberg, the event that we're going to focus on is the removal of Native Americans. Take a few moments and record any key facts, dates, places, people, and specifically what changed. In step 2, this is where you're going to consider what you identified as short-term and triggers and explain how they led to this event. Step 3 is where you will review all those long-term causes that you identified, and as you are pulling all of them together to compose your response for this part, you should also know the types of forces that were at play. Specifically, think about economic, social, and political forces that acted to cause this moment. And if you're not exactly sure what we mean by that or what would go here, I would suggest rereading the text and this time annotate for these 3 factors. The deep dive step is the most analytical of the 4. Now that you are clearly aware of the causes, let's take time to really analyze and evaluate them. And like it says here, you might start off by looking for connections between 2 or more of the causes. Another avenue you should consider exploring is determining whether the causes are necessary, sufficient, or relative. And you can see right here that we do provide a brief model of each one. And if you would like a little further explanation about these types of causes and more concrete examples of each, there is a separate video made dedicated to the causation tool. After using this tool to take a really hard look at the causes leading up to the removal of Native Americans, let's take a moment to apply your knowledge. On this slide, we are introduced to the concept of settler colonialism, which, as we can see here, is a type of colonization that supports the continuation and expansion of settler occupation, as well as the exploitation of lands and resources to which indigenous people previously held claim. And then we have three prompts that are right here. And the purpose of them is to really steer your thinking for this fourth and last one. Now, based on what you've learned about all the causes leading up to this monstrous event, do you think it truly qualifies as an example of settler colonialism? And I'm not exactly sure how your teacher is going to have you discuss these prompts, whether it's going to be typed or verbally, in small groups, or as a class, but you should be prepared to provide an explanation for your claim, so make sure that you have supporting evidence ready. The lesson now transitions to the part where you are going to evaluate primary sources to determine which is the most reliable for learning about the causes of the removal of Native Americans from their ancestral lands. If you remember back to all the work you've previously done with the sourcing and evaluating reliability tool, the factors that you want to consider when doing this are the author's, or in this case, the artist's, point of view, purpose, bias, and audience. Here we see the image John Ross, a Cherokee chief, and since this is an image, sometimes it is more difficult to determine those four factors. And here's my advice for you. You have to take full advantage of the information that is provided and use that to make educated inferences. For instance, in this image, you are not only given the citation information below it, but also information about the artist and the subject of this lithograph, who is John Ross, up here in the header. Additionally, remember that you are not looking at this image in isolation. You just read and analyzed a secondary source that provided you with a thorough historical context. And lastly, make sure that you take a good look at the image itself. What details do you notice? Why do you think the artist made some of the decisions he did when making this piece? With all this information, what can you infer his point of view was? And how might that impact his purpose? And what types of bias do you start seeing be made visible to you? If you are a bit lost with this, my last piece of advice is for you to look closely at the details about how the artist depicts Ross's personal traits. Then use this as the basis for your overall evaluation of this source's reliability for learning about Native American removal. After this is completed, you will then be organized into a group of three and assigned one of these three sources to evaluate the reliability of, just like we just did for the John Ross image. Afterwards, each member of your group will post their overall reliability assessment, including the explanation, on a note-sharing site such as Padlet. Doing so will provide everyone with the reliability assessment of the other two sources that they personally did not see. If your teacher does utilize Padlet for this activity, the directions for posting on it are here. And don't forget that your peers are relying on you to provide an accurate reliability assessment. So when you are providing your rationale, make certain that you are thorough. Make sure that you include at least one of those four reliability factors in your response for their benefit. So that would be either point of view, purpose, bias, or audience. The reason all of you want to be so thorough is because in the final check for understanding in this lesson, you're going to be asked to summarize a cause of Native American removal by citing one of the primary sources that you believe is the most reliable. The wrap-up question, which we see right here, asks you to again consider how this horrible event was an example of settler colonialism, similar to that question that was asked earlier in the lesson. However, this time you have the knowledge from the primary sources to support your claim.